Okay, now we're going to talk about how we introduce this middle finger into our finger picking pattern. So obviously earlier on we covered, thumb and first finger techniques and that kind of alternating, bouncing back and forth between those two notes. But now what's happening is we're going to introduce the middle finger. Now this is brilliant, okay? This is the moment where this technique really starts to come to life, I think. Okay, the important thing to remember here is that the thumb, nothing's changing, okay? The thumb is playing the 6th string and the 5th string. And sometimes it might alternate between those two, depending on if we want to create a kind of bluesy or a country feel to the track, or just, for whatever. There's tons of reasons why we might do that. But a lot of the time, I would say, depends which genres you're playing, of course, but a lot of the time your thumb isn't kind of bouncing back and forth on the bass notes. It's just holding down a steady beat and providing that bass end of the spectrum. So what that means is that, that's giving us the low. Remember, all music is kind of broken up into low, mid and high, or bass, middle and treble if you prefer. And if you want your music to sound interesting, then you need to clearly articulate those different bits. If you just play chords, 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 then the low, mid and high is all jumbled in together into one wall, the wall of chord, and it just comes flying at you, yeah? If you want your music to sound more interesting, then you have to deliberately articulate low bits, mid bits and high bits, yeah? And that's what makes your music sound more interesting, really. Makes it sound more cultured and a bit more professional. So this is why this particular finger picking technique works so well, I think, because you get the delineation between those two things really, really clearly. Let's look at a chord progression. So I'm going to pick D. I'm going to go to A. I'm going to go to B minor. And then to G. Okay, now what I want you to watch here is that on the D chord, you can see, yeah, I'm just playing the root with my thumb. Do the same when we change to the A chord. We change to the B minor, and I do the same thing. I'm playing the root note, and then we change to the G. So far, so good, yeah? But what we're going to do here is these two fingers are going to play two strings that are further down that chord. But this is the cool thing. It doesn't matter what two strings you play. This is the great thing about finger picking, is that remember, all we're doing, there's no secret patterns. All we're doing is picking out notes that are within the chord that are already there. Okay, that's all we're ever doing. So depending on what creatively you want to convey, you can pick whatever two strings you want. Okay, what you'll find is that it tends to work best or sound best in my experience if you're pretty consistent around what those two strings are. If you change those two strings from every single chord, then things can sound a bit unbalanced. But of course, when you're playing open chords, you can't play the same strings all the time. So there's a little bit of trial and error involved here. It's much, much simpler if you're playing bar chords, because then you can just pick the same two strings. So let's look at that same progression. So if I play it in bar chords, then I'm going to play the root note here. And I'm going to choose, because I feel like it, yeah, I'm going to choose to play these two strings here. So my middle finger here is on the 2nd string, and my index finger is here on the 3rd string. Let's just hear how that sounds. Okay. Down to the G. Oh, sorry, it was to A, wasn't it? So we'll go from D. B minor to the G. Okay, so nothing too clever there. I'm just playing the root note with my thumb, and then these two are just pulling out those other two strings. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. One of the things that almost always works well is if you're going down like 1, 2, 3, usually works well if you touch back on that note on your way back to the root note. So if we're playing here, here and here, it generally works well to touch there on your way back to there. Yeah, what it does is it just links things together quite smoothly. Listen to how this sounds. Don't worry about the chord. Remember, the chord changes all the time. What I want you to picture here is the pattern that we're using here. So yeah, that's a really, really important pattern that we're using there. We can apply this on other strings and it will still work, okay? So we're going root note. Let me change the guitar around so you can see. We're going root note. Then we're going to drop down. Yeah, but what I'm playing with my right hand isn't changing here. Down to the G. Really, really cool. Listen to how things change if I play two different strings here. So we'll stick with this D, but I'm going to just bring things up here and I'm going to play the middle two strings now, okay? So my middle finger's on the third string, my first finger here is on the fourth string. Listen to how this changes things. Can you hear that we've got a bit more mid-range there? It doesn't sound quite as twinkly as it sounded a moment ago. Let's go the other way. What about if we play these two strings? Yeah, strings 1 and strings 2. So thumb. It sounds really, really twinkly now, doesn't it? Okay, now the reason why I showed you all of that in bar chords was because with bar chords you can just kind of stick with the exact same strings. You can say for this entire sequence I'm going to play first string, you know, and then whatever of the two strings you want to play. But when we play open chords we don't quite have that luxury, excuse me, because the root notes for those chords, they move around. That doesn't happen with bar chords, okay? So when you're playing down this end, as I said, there's a bit of trial and error. But the solid rule is you always play the root note with your thumb, and then you can literally take your pick from all of the other strings that we play within that chord as to which ones you target with those two fingers. It's entirely up to you, okay? It really, really is that simple. Of course, if you're playing an E chord where the root note is on the E string, then you're spoilt for choice because you've got 5 other strings there that you can play. Generally, we wouldn't play the A string with these two fingers because the thumb kind of dominates those two strings, that area. Okay, so generally what we're talking about with our fingers is strings 1, 2, 3 and 4 from a finger picking point of view. But we could play these two, 1 and 2, or we could play 2 and 3, or we could play 3 and 4. We've got lots of choices when we play any chord where the root note is on this string. If the root note is on the A string, so say for example the chord was C, for argument's sake, then we have one less string that we can play with. Okay? And if it were D, or if we were playing a simple F chord, then the root note would be here on that string. And then we only have 3 options really that we can play with. But within all of those ranges that you have there, that pattern that I've shown you will always work. Will never ever not work. Root note with the thumb, and then take your pick of 2 other strings that are there. Just keep it really, really simple while you're getting used to this pattern, okay? Pick a song that you know well, where the chord changes are easy for you. I mean, even just pick one chord, you know, and just hold on that chord. The reason I'm suggesting this is I know from experience that this moment where the middle finger comes in, it adds a layer of complexity that makes some people really confused. Most people can do like thumb and first finger stuff okay, but when the middle finger comes in, some people are just like, it's just too much for them, you know? So if it's really hard and you're really struggling with this, just literally hold one chord. Just pick a G chord or an E minor, something really simple like E minor, and just practice targeting different notes there. Yeah, and just try and get that down. Do it really slow if you need to. You know, just literally break it right down. That might be a bit painful for you to practice, But it's a really great way to learn, is to just do something slow and correct. Don't try and rush it. Do it slow and get it right, and then you're building good muscle memory. We've covered a lot of ground in this lesson, okay? This is a really, really fundamental one. I'd say probably out of this like entire, series of lessons that we're doing here, this one is one of the most fundamental of all. So really hope you've enjoyed it. We've covered a lot here. I hope I haven't overwhelmed you. And yeah, we're going to move on and look at some other exercises and ways that we can develop this.